All right, so we've talked about this concept of money, and we've talked about how a given economy can have multiple cultural systems of economics governing the value of things. Money is not a universal measure of value. There are places throughout the world where money is kind of a foreign concept. There have been some interesting economic anthropological modeling done with subsistence economies, where to even play economic games that are widely played in introductory level economic classes at universities and such, that they couldn't play those games for money in these economies because money was such a foreign concept. So they had to come up with something else that was valued. And interestingly, that was cigarettes. Cigarettes held more value than actual money did to these people. But we've got to recognize that what drives value isn't money per se, but rather the sociocultural relationships and processes that work together to create value. So we can't consider economics as separate from or independent of other aspects of culture. So we're going to look at a few examples um, just to recognize how this plays out. Among the Tiv pastoralists of Nigeria, among almost all pastoralist populations, there is an economic exchange that has to take place before marriage. Now, really quickly, just to give you a background about marriage and economics and what we see across different adaptive strategies, there marriage is first and foremost an economic union. Even in modern times, it's more economic, less driven by love. When we look across cultures, love isn't even really a factor in most marriage decisions. Arranged marriages are used to create economic alliances and relationships of affinity. So, as such, because marriage is first and foremost economic, there are systems of economic exchange that are made prior to allowing for marriage. And so in the Maasai Women film, you saw bride price. You saw that the husband and his family had to bring objects of value to pass along to the bride's father in order to gain the rights of access to the bride's work and reproduction. In foraging societies, because they don't accrue resources, that economic exchange is through the form of bride service. What that means is that the husband, the prospective husband, has to come to the bride's village, the bride's family, and live and work with them for upwards of 5 to 10 years. And so, because of that, marriage happens pretty young, before the age of menarche. In the film Nye Story of a Kung Woman, Gunda and Nye are married when Nye is only 8 and Gunda's 13. That doesn't mean it's child marriage per se, because they didn't start to sleep together in the sense of sharing a hut or anything until Nye was much older. Gunda had to hunt for Nye's father for a full 10 years before he was able to kind of consummate the marriage and start a family with Nye. So a lot of people think that in that context, it's the equivalent of like child marriages in industrialized nations. Totally not, totally different. In pastoral populations, it's very widespread that because the daughter is being removed from her father's household and her work and labor is being lost, that the family of the husband must pay bride price in order to gain the rights of access to marry that bride. Because of this, women are valued by their fathers because they generate wealth for their fathers. But it's also associated then with women having pretty low status and a lack of like rights of ownership and stuff in their new household. Like you recall from the Maasai Women movie that they really didn't have anything except for 9 cattle that were gifted them by their husband to start their son's bride price herds. So um, among the Tiv, the bride price needs to be paid with limited purpose money of cattle. So cattle is the currency. Cattle could be purchased with limited purpose money of brass rods. So in order to buy a cow, you had to have enough brass rods to be able to pay for the cow. You could not substitute brass rods, though, to pay for your bride price because it needed to be something that was culturally valuable. So the Tiv have 3 separate spheres of exchange: ordinary substance goods, prestige goods, and then rights in terms of people. During the British colonial days, general purpose money caused social disruption because the Tiv considered it immoral to pay bride price with those brass rods, with money. And to this day, among many pastoral populations, though they've been integrated into modern market economies, bride price itself is not something that can be paid in cash. It's something that has to be paid in other forms. There is a similar cultural exchange among industrial, well, not among intensive agricultural societies where the plow has been introduced, and that is in the form of dowry. You've probably heard of dowry. Dowry feels to a lot of people like it's the opposite of bride price because it's resources that the bride and her family must amass to gift to the husband in order to curry his favor in marriage, in order to get him to be willing to marry. But the difference is that what bride price buys is paternity, okay? Bride price is associated with the female leaving her father's community and going and living in the husband's, and then the husband having paternity rights over any offspring born from that union. Dowry doesn't give you the same benefit. So dowry doesn't buy maternity. Dowry doesn't cause the husband to come live with the females group um, and give the female rights of access over the husband's work. Rather, dowry is associated with female inferiority and the treatment of females as forms of property, as chattel. And dowry is associated with incredibly low female status with respect to gendered status, and also is I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, associated with female-female competition over access to high-quality mates. And so it serves its function as a form of competition, and there are dowry murders. Every 20 minutes, a woman in India, and India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, that area, dies because she's been murdered for her dowry. So people will kill their competitors and steal their dowries in order to secure their daughters' marriages to men who have higher social status than them. So they're not synonymous. It's a form of control over females' sexuality. But dowry in those contexts can only sometimes be paid in money. It's oftentimes paid in jewelry and gold, etc. So, cross culturally, we see a lot of variety in how we conceptualize values. According to David Graeber, types of money are tied to different kinds of power relations. We believe that debts need to be repaid, even if it causes suffering. Where does this idea come from? It really is commodity money that's tightly tied to the creation of debt, violence, and control over others. And so when we've got human economies as opposed to commercial economies, money is used for social purposes and may not be used to pay off a debt. So a debt would be paid off by your actions, by currying favor, by being generous, by um, you know, uh, by negotiating like marriage relationships and